Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
Rain hammered the tin roof like it was trying to punch through. I was locking up the woodshop on Clybourne, dragging the roll-up gate down, when I saw her, soaked to the bone, sitting alone in a wheelchair under the big oak by the fence. She looked like she'd been there a while. No umbrella, no coat, just shivering, staring forward like she'd already given up. I dropped everything, jogged out, yanked off my jacket, and got it over her shoulders. She looked up, calm somehow, and said, "My name's Caitlin Stewart." Her voice was steady, tired, but not weak. "Let's get you inside," I said. My hands were already on the chair, wheels sticking in the wet gravel. The shop wasn't much, but it was dry. I rolled her past the jointer, past the sawdust piles I never cleaned up like I should have. Got her near the space heater, found the old wool shop blanket from the back room, wrapped it around her, and shoved a stool under her feet to get them off the concrete. Quick note: before we dive in, share in the comments how is your day going and which city or country you're watching from. Thanks, and let's continue. "Water?" I asked, already filling the kettle on the hot plate. She nodded, hands trembling from the cold. I got soup going, cheap instant stuff I kept around for late nights. It wasn't dinner, but it was warm. 10 minutes, she said between sips. My son-in-law said he'd be back in 10 minutes. My gut twisted. "And how long's it been?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the steam curling off the cup. "Too long." I grabbed a towel from the finishing bin, handed it over without asking, then dug out a dry pair of wool socks from the extras I kept for cold mornings. She changed slowly, every movement careful, like she knew how much she could rely on her own arms. I didn't say anything. Didn't ask the obvious. I just kept moving, sweeping a corner, lighting the small lamp near the bench, pulling down the shelf of carvings I sometimes whittled when I couldn't sleep. She pointed at a clumsy little poodle I'd made last winter. "You do these?" I nodded. "Helps me think. Nice to meet a man who works with his hands and doesn't hide his heart behind them." That stopped me for a second. She didn't say it like a compliment, more like she'd seen the opposite too many times. "My name's David Walker," I told her. "I'm 30, carpenter, shop owner. For now." Her eyes narrowed, like she was reading something behind my words. I explained, quick and plain. Lost my wife and daughter in delivery 2 years ago. No family left. This shop was the dream we had together, but the lease got sold out from under me. Landlords pushing demolition. The alderman's office said there's no official stay, just, "We'll try to nudge the property manager. Not much to hang your tools on." "Still fighting for it?" "Until they padlock the door," I said. She reached for her bag, pulled out a battered leather organizer, flipped through it with practiced hands, and said, "Call Audrey, my daughter. She'll come." Her phone was dead, so I took the number and called from mine. No answer. Left a message. Then I brewed tea, handed her the cup, and sat down across from her while the thunder cracked. She looked around at the shop, the clamps, the half-done stool on the bench, the stubborn old lathe I never gave up on. "Nice place," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "For another 24 hours, maybe." I rolled her closer to the heater, watched the steam rise off her sleeves, and said, "We'll give her a bit. She'll come." But the truth was, we were both listening for a car that never showed up. The morning came heavy with fog and cold that stuck to your teeth. I hadn't slept, just kept the coffee going while I waited for headlights that never came. Then around 8, a silver SUV nosed up to the curb. I recognized the shape before the make. Doors clicked open. A woman stepped out, neat, sharp lines, coat buttoned to her throat. Audrey Stewart. And trailing her like a shot out of a slingshot came a little girl, no coat, boots untied, hair bouncing. Alice. The second she was through the door, her eyes darted across the room and locked onto the little carved poodle still sitting by the heater. She made a beeline for it, turned to me and said, "Is this a real dog breed or made up?" "Probably made up," I said, But if it ever becomes one, you'll get to name it. She gave me a look like I'd just handed her a key to something secret. Then she grinned so hard her cheeks crinkled. Okay, I'll think about it. Maybe something serious, like Professor Barkington. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Strong choice. You want to sand something? She looked at her mom for half a second, got no objection, and nodded fast. I handed her a small scrap and showed her how to follow the grain, not fight it. 3 careful passes, and she handed it back like it was crystal. Audrey hadn't said much yet, just stood there, arms folded, taking in the corners of the shop. She checked her mom's hands for warmth, then scanned the benches, the tools, the project's half done. Her eyes didn't miss a thing. Caitlin looked more alive than she had last night. Blanket still around her legs, cup of tea back in her lap. She gave me a look, then glanced at Audrey. He's a decent man, she said, firm. Knows his hands from his heart. Audrey didn't respond right away. Then she stepped forward, reached into her bag, and pulled out an envelope. For your time, and for not leaving her in the rain. Inside was $350 in cash. I hadn't named a number. Would have asked for a lot less. I nodded and slipped it into the drawer under the drill press. Name's Audrey Stewart. Stewart Home and Design, she said, pulling a card and setting it on the bench. I'm CEO. I glanced at the card, then back at her. You run it? I built it, from 1 room to 12 states. Her voice didn't brag. It was just a fact. A builder's voice, not a marketer's. Alice was petting the poodle carving with 1 finger, whispering something to it under her breath. Audrey noticed and raised an eyebrow, like it caught her off guard that her daughter, who clearly didn't warm up to strangers, was already halfway through naming a wooden dog. Caitlin shifted slightly and spoke quiet, only loud enough for Audrey and me. Andrew dropped me here, said 10 minutes. I saw Audrey's jaw lock, just for a second. He didn't tell me. Caitlin gave a small shrug. Didn't think he would. I stayed out of it. This wasn't my battlefield, but I did file away the name, Andrew Nelson. Audrey turned back to me. She told me you might be the kind of person we could work with. Local artisan partnerships, community workshops, apprenticeship programs, sustainable sourcing, reclaimed timber builds. I blinked. That a real offer, or just coffee talk? It's a real offer if you want it. Would start as consulting, full-time if it fits. My hands were still dirty from last night. The idea of a job that wasn't just sanding until I collapsed hit harder than I expected. I looked around the shop, at the space I was still losing in a few hours. They're coming at noon, I said. Demo crew. I got a few hours to pull what I can. Audrey didn't hesitate. We'll figure the tools out first. Alice piped up again, her eyes big. Can I have the poodle? I leaned against the workbench. He's yours. She gasped like Christmas had just been announced, cradled it with both hands, and ran over to show her grandma. Audrey shook her head, quietly impressed. She doesn't trust many people. She trusts dogs, I said. She doesn't trust wooden ones either, she replied. Then, after a pause, come by Wednesday, we'll talk next steps. She made it to the door, then stopped. Thank you for not looking away. I watched them pull out, taillights fading through the morning fog. Then I grabbed my phone and called Jonah. Need a van, I said, and 2 strong backs, 4-hour window. Where's the fire? In my shop, I told him. Clock's ticking. Jonah showed up with the van and 2 guys from his roastery, and we made the 4-hour sprint count. The bandsaw stayed bolted down, but we stripped the rest. By Sunday night, the shop looked more like a crime scene than a workspace. Chalk lines where dreams used to sit. Wednesday morning, I rode a mirrored elevator to the 12th floor of Stewart Home and Design. The walls smelled like fresh varnish and quarterly goals, frosted glass, quiet lighting, everything built to keep you from raising your voice. Nora Hill met me in the hallway before I even found the right door. Crisp blazer, thick glasses, handshake, like she was closing a deal before she said a word. Nora, Chief Operating Officer, let's get started. I followed her past an open bullpen full of hushed conversations and soft keyboard taps. She didn't slow down. In a glass-walled conference room, 2 women were already waiting. The first nodded politely, without standing. Sable Quinn, communications, sharp suit, arms crossed, eyes cool. The second wore flat shoes, a legal pad, and a face that didn't blink much. Ivy Lamb. Legal, she said. We'll walk through the interim agreement before anything else. Nora handed me a folder and pointed to a page near the back. 3-month contract, head of artisan partnerships, annualized at $104,000, plus a small tool stipend and mileage. I didn't say anything, just read it again, slower. Any questions? Ivy asked, flipping to the clauses like she already knew which ones might trip me up. Do I keep my name on the programs? I asked. Not for credit, just for trust. Of course, she said without flinching. Your credibility's the whole point. Before I could respond, the door opened and brought a different kind of energy. Expensive cologne hit first, then the grin. Andrew Nelson, he said, flashing too much teeth. Business development. His handshake was wet and fast, like he couldn't wait to let go and check his reflection in the glass. You know how corporate works, right? He asked, like we were about to test me. Enough to know when it's not, I said. Audrey came in right behind him, blazer sharp but hair pulled back like she hadn't wasted time fussing. She nodded at me, then took a seat next to Nora. I laid out my idea. Short and simple. Neighborhood workshops for teens. Historic porch restoration to keep old homes standing. Union apprentice paths. Salvage operations for usable timber from tear-down sites. Nora took notes like she was recording blueprints. Andrew leaned back in his chair. Cute community spin. Maybe we shoot some promo reels. Kids with hammers and sunset lighting. Audrey cut him off without raising her voice. David's not here for photo ops. His smile cracked for half a second, then came back twice as wide. I signed the interim. Ivy slid a second copy across the table. South Side Pilot, North Shore Restoration, Saturday trial class, she confirmed. Start by this weekend. That's short notice, I said. Audrey nodded. We're late to this kind of work. No reason to waste another week. I didn't argue, but I knew I'd have to stall the demo crew a little longer. After the meeting, I stepped into the hallway to call the landlord. No answer. Then a text came through. Grace window through Sunday, 6 p.m. I could work with that. We printed the message and posted it at the door of the old shop. I rolled in one last workbench and lined up 12 hand planes like I was setting a dinner table. The Saturday class filled up fast. 8 kids, all under 18. Guardians signed off, waivers copied and logged. No power tools, just chisels, clamps, and sweat. That morning, I stood by the door with a clipboard and a knot in my gut. I wasn't nervous about the class. I was nervous about the ceiling holding up through the rain. Caitlin came early, wheeled in with a bag of cookies and a clipboard of her own. I'm not just here to watch, she said. If you're going to do this right, you need real feedback. She pointed out where the stools were too low, where I needed a second broom, and where the coffee setup would choke a proper crowd. I took every note. Audrey stopped by halfway through the session. She didn't say much, just watched. Alice came too, sat on the floor and practiced dovetails on a block of poplar. She had better technique than half the adults I knew. We kept it quiet, per the landlord's conditions. The Grace window was posted in full behind the shop door, along with the property manager's confirmation that we were cleared for educational use through Sunday evening. Jonah texted later that day, 3 tool chests tucked safe in the back of his shop, bandsaw still waiting for the right liftgate. I exhaled for the first time in a week. I spent the rest of that night on the floor of my dead shop, head against a crate, watching dust settle in the moonlight. The work wasn't done, but for the first time, I had a plan and a place to start. We kept the lights on at the old place just long enough to build a bridge. And by the fourth week, we weren't crawling anymore. We stood up 2 pilot programs, Guild Saturdays for teens and Porch First. A small batch micro grant for seniors needing repairs that wouldn't make it past a city inspector, but meant the world to the people living under those roofs. Each cohort filled fast. No ad campaign, no glossy flyers, just word of mouth and names on clipboards. The kids came hungry to learn. Most had never held a square, never heard of a scribe, but they picked it up like muscle memory. I showed one kid how to set a mortise with hand chisels. Next week, he brought his granddad's tools and asked to learn how to sharpen them. It felt like building something real for the first time in years. Caitlin showed up with cookies and corrections, rolled straight through the side door like she owned the place, which technically, she kind of did. She called out our sign-up sheet for being hard to read, pointed out the coffee filters were in the wrong drawer, and told me the bench height was off by half an inch. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, "You're getting there, son," like the word just slipped out. She didn't take it back. I didn't call attention to it. Alice tagged along to one Saturday class and took over a corner like she was part of payroll. She showed 2 other kids how to sand safely and called me the funniest boss, which isn't true, but I kept it in my back pocket like a medal. Audrey and I stayed on opposite sides of a clear line. She ran the operations like a machine. I handled the floor like a crew chief. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about safety protocols, permits, attendance gaps. Sometimes when the day ran long, we'd split a sandwich on the loading dock, half turkey, half silence. It was the closest thing to peace I'd had in a long time. Now and then, someone new would ask if Andrew was Alice's dad. I got good at saying no before Audrey even had to. Her fiancé, Alice's father, died on deployment. That was years ago, but you could see it still lived in the corners of her eyes. Andrew came after, marriage made of strategy and paper, never stuck right. His name started circling again when he disappeared for a week with no warning. Permits, someone said. Conference, another. Then he showed up at the office like nothing happened. No apology, no gap in rhythm. Just business as usual. Caitlin didn't bring it up, and Audrey didn't explain. But her shoulders carried something new, like she'd been holding her breath too long. One afternoon, Nora pulled me aside while we were reviewing grant intake. She kept her voice low, steady. "There's chatter. He might have pre-sold a piece of future contracts to a private lender, gray money. Loan against revenue that hasn't even landed yet." The words made my stomach turn. With board approval? Unclear. But if he did it without sign-off, it could blow a hole through our next quarter. That same week, Sable Quinn stopped by the floor during class change. She looked like she was carrying something heavier than a press packet. "I misjudged you," she said. "At first. Not the first time I've been the guy someone thinks won't last." She nodded once. "I'd like to help frame the public side of these programs." "Frame the people," I said, "not me." She smiled just slightly. Good answer. That Friday, we took home a community award at the Lakeview Craft and Trades Expo. Small plaque, hand-painted lettering, nothing that'd land in a magazine. But every apprentice in our cohort came. Caitlin made sure the booth was polished. Alice handed out flyers like a pro. Audrey took a photo of me with 2 kids from the porch crew, and I didn't even blink. I wasn't used to being in the frame, but that day, it didn't feel like I was stealing it. Andrew didn't show. Too local. No press. He only turned up when there was a stage to stand on. That night, Audrey caught me before I left. She had that careful look she used when the conversation was about to edge somewhere personal. "I need you to promise something," she said, "that will keep it clean. Professional. I'm still sorting things, and I can't—" "You got it," I said. "Line stays. I'm here to build." She exhaled, nodded once, then looked away like she was already shifting gears. I left through the garage, down the back stairwell, keys in hand. That's when I saw Andrew. He leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, smile sharp as a tack. "Heck of a turn you've made," he said. "Just doing the work," I replied. "Sure," he said, pushing off the wall. "Just don't get too comfortable. I didn't answer. Just walked past him and hit the exit bar hard enough to echo. Monday started like any other. Coffee burned, boots tied, inbox full. Then 2 security guards showed up at my desk. "Need you to come with us," one said. "Bring your badge." They didn't say more, but their faces already told me it wasn't a tour. I followed them through the hall. Glass, chrome, silence. We reached one of the side conference rooms, all windows and no corners to hide in. Inside, Ivy sat with a woman from HR I'd seen maybe once before. Neither looked up. The folder on the table was thick. Ivy slid it forward. "David, this morning we flagged a set of access logs that show your employee ID was used to download protected bid data, estimates, vendor terms, at 2:08 a.m. Sunday." I blinked. "I wasn't here Sunday." "We're aware," Ivy said. "The credentials were used remotely." "I don't work remotely," I said. "And my shop computer's been locked in a bin at Jonah's since last week." She didn't argue. Didn't smile either. HR spoke. "We're placing you on paid suspension for 72 hours pending investigation. During this time, do not access Stewart systems or premises." Ivy added, "Please hand over your badge now." I slid it across the table. My hand didn't shake, but my gut felt like I'd stepped on a nail. They let me walk out the front like nothing had happened. Heads turned. A few people stood a little too still. I didn't stop to read faces. Downstairs, things got worse. The property manager taped a red notice to the shop's roll-up. Big letters, bold print. Property transfer, no entry. Trespass notice active. Final equipment removal. Deadline, 48 hours. The grace window was over. Sunday at 6 p.m. had come and gone. This was city-issued now. And legal told us before, municipal notices override private agreements. That bandsaw was on borrowed time. Most of the gear was already safe. But the last saw, my first real industrial piece, was still bolted to concrete. I'd waited on a liftgate truck that never opened up, and now I was out of time, out of access, and out of badge clearance. I took the bus to Jonah's. He didn't ask, just poured coffee and slid it across the counter. "Okay," he said, calm as ever. "What do we do?" My phone buzzed before I could answer. "Nora." Short text. "Don't say a word to Andrew. Not yet." A second buzz. "Audrey." "I don't believe this. Hold tight. We're working." Jonah leaned on the counter. "Want me to say what everyone's thinking?" "I already know who did it." He nodded. "Still, say it anyway." Andrew cloned my badge, or faked my credentials, or paid someone who did. I hadn't seen the proof, but I didn't need to. The timing stank. The target was too clean, and it felt like something a man like him would do. Calculated, just short of visible. That night, my phone rang again. Caitlin. She didn't waste time. You're not the first good man he's tried to wipe off the board. The charm fools people until the door closes. Then it's rot. Her voice was quiet but hard. I could hear her stirring something on the stove. He's the kind of man who smiles wide when he thinks no one's watching. Tuesday morning, Jonah got a surprise visit from a city inspector. A guy with a clipboard and too many questions about counter heights and floor drainage. Jonah kept it cool, but the guy wasn't subtle. Wrote up 2 things that had never mattered before. "Coincidence?" Jonah asked as soon as the guy left. "No chance." Nora called half an hour later. "Andrew had a coffee meeting last week with someone from the Department of Inspections. I pulled it off his calendar. Could be nothing. Could be leverage." My head was buzzing. Not just from the pressure, something deeper, violation. I'd been framed before I even saw the hit coming. And now they wanted me quiet. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat on the floor of Jonah's back room, thumb running over the notch in my wedding ring I still wore on a cord. That little gouge on the edge, made by the corner of the hospital bed the day they told me we lost her. I used to smooth it with my thumb like a habit. Now I used it to remind myself what staying steady felt like. I decided then I wasn't rolling over. I'd fight it. Not loud, not messy, just clean and sharp and quiet. By Tuesday evening, I had a plan for the bandsaw. Think we can crack it without a lift gate? I asked Jonah. We've got 2 ratchet sets and a concrete wedge, he said. What we don't have, we'll borrow. The sun dropped fast. We got to the shop at dusk, under that big red notice, and popped the back lock like we were stealing from our own grave. The bolts on the bandsaw were old and stubborn, but Jonah kept tension while I hammered the anchors from below. It took us 40 minutes, maybe 50. But by the time the streetlights clicked on, we had it loose and ratcheted into the van bed with 2 tie-downs and a busted dolly. I closed the doors and slapped the latch shut. One last machine, one last piece of work I'd earned the hard way. The next morning, Nora showed up at his roastery with a box under one arm and a folded city map in her hand. She didn't waste time, just walked into the back, set everything on the prep table, and said, "We're going to catch him." She pulled out a recorder, small, black, no bigger than a matchbox. Next came the map of the Rook and Lantern, marked with red pen. Andrew goes here after expos. Same booth every time. Back corner near the dartboard. Rye whiskey, 2 cubes, no conversation until the second pour, she said like she was reading off a service manual. Do we need consent to record? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Already covered, she said. They've got posted notice at both entrances. Audio and video monitoring active at all times. I called the manager. He gave us permission and logged it. Ivy confirmed it falls under Internal Policy 4.3. Legal's got it documented. I looked at the recorder. My throat was dry. You want me to bait him? She nodded. You play like you're walking away. Burned out. Done. Make it sound like you want a clean exit. 6 months severance and a quiet reference. He'll take the bait if he thinks you're out of the picture and desperate. I hesitated, not out of fear, but because I hated that this was what it had come to. Trickery, wires, ambushes in pubs. Nora saw it. She sat on the edge of the prep table and let out a breath. You want to know why I care? She asked. Alice was 6 when Audrey almost broke. I stayed with her some nights so Audrey could get 2 hours of sleep without waking up in panic. That girl matters. Her future matters. And you, David. You're part of it now, whether you meant to be or not. I didn't have anything to say to that. She didn't expect me to. That afternoon, Sable dropped by, still in her trademark grays, but something in her posture was less guarded. I didn't think you belonged here when you walked in, she said. I thought you were a PR stunt with sawdust on your boots. Appreciate the honesty. Not the judgment, I said. She smiled just slightly. If you get what we need, I'll help frame the board narrative. Truth matters more than spin right now. Then Ivy called. Her voice was sharp as usual, but there was something behind it this time. Urgency. We traced the breach. Your badge was cloned through the RFID copier in the copy room 3 nights before the downloads. Security footage shows Andrew alone in that room after hours. No meeting on the calendar. No IT request logged. My stomach turned. Cloning a badge is not hard, she added. You'd be surprised how many execs forget that door readers log timestamps. That same evening, Gordon emailed everyone marked Board Internal Priority. Simple subject line, emergency slot held Thursday, credible evidence required. He ended the message with one line, bring timber, not sawdust. We spent the next hour pulling apart the investor records. Nora had already flagged the Gray connection, fast cash warehouse lender, the kind that trades short-term capital for long-term slices of projected revenue. A legal chop shop for contract pipelines. Turns out Andrew had quietly pledged sections of Stewart's future work to cover a private loan. No board vote, no disclosure. Then the email came from Clyde Price, Andrew's attorney. Legal language, thick with warning. Something about potential defamation liability if unproven accusations were circulated internally or externally. I read it twice and tossed my phone on the workbench. Classic move. Scare people into silence before they open their mouths. That night, Nora pulled out the final version of the plan. We'd wait until after the Midwest Builders Summit Awards. The Rook and Lantern would be full of tradespeople and industry types. He'd feel safe there, confident. "You'll go in first," she said. "I'll follow 20 minutes later, sit at the bar. We'll keep visual contact, but no interference. You open soft. You make it personal. Let him think he's already won." I looked at the recorder again. My fingers didn't shake, but my chest felt tight. Not fear, not even anger, just the weight of it all. What happens if he doesn't take the bait? Then we fall back. But if he talks, we get it on tape, and Ivy takes it to the board. Before we wrapped, Audrey found me in the hallway outside the elevator. She didn't say much, just stood there, watching my face like she was measuring something. Then she touched my sleeve and said, "Be careful." I nodded. Always. And for once, it wasn't just something to say. The Midwest Builders Summit was everything I expected and none of what I wanted. Too much cologne, too many speeches, and way too many men congratulating themselves for showing up. I stayed quiet most of the night, let the others work the crowd while I shook hands and counted minutes. The moment the lights dimmed and the sponsor banners came down, I slipped out through the back and walked the 6 blocks to the Rook and Lantern. It was already buzzing by the time I got there. Old hardwood floors, booths scratched from decades of elbows and deals, the air thick with whiskey and cheap aftershave. This was Andrew's arena. He didn't belong in boardrooms. He belonged in back corners where you could talk dirty and call it strategy. I found the booth. Same one Nora marked, tucked near the dartboard, half-shadowed but with a clean line of sight to the bar. I slid in and waited. 12 minutes later, Andrew walked in like he owned the air. Navy blazer, collar open, smile aimed in 10 directions. He slapped a few backs on the way through, tossed a wink at a server, and landed across from me like this was his kingdom and I was just a pawn who remembered his place. His cologne hit before his voice did. Too much musk, not enough truth. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said, waving the server for his usual. "Figured you'd be sulking in a basement with a busted lathe." I kept my eyes down, let my shoulders slump just enough. "I'll walk," I said. 6 months severance, neutral reference. I won't fight the suspension. Just let me walk clean." He leaned back, smirked. "There it is. Shop class charity. I knew you were a short-term bet. Not everyone's built for scale." The server dropped his drink. Rye, 2 cubes, no garnish. "The board needed a fall guy," he said, sipping like we were old pals swapping war stories. "You made it easy. No priors, no political weight. Clean trajectory, that's rare." I swallowed hard but said nothing. He leaned forward. "Look, I didn't invent the playbook. I just refined it. You leak one bad report, you protect the brand from feel-good spending. Everyone gets nervous when the numbers start looking soft. It's easier if the bleeding heart takes the hit." I kept my hand near my collar, not touching the recorder, but very aware of it. It was warm now, close to my skin, catching every word. He started bragging about smoothing city permits, about how easy it was to add a finder's fee without anyone catching it. You grease one guy, he introduces you to another. You start to get a feel for where the codes bend, where the forms get rubber stamped. People think it's corruption. It's not. It's lubrication. He chuckled at his own joke and downed the rest of his whiskey. Then came the part I needed. He leaned in again. "You know how many people read those bridge loan papers? 0. All they see is cash flow projection. So I fed a Shell LLC a pipeline, they handed over the bridge cash, and everybody wins." "What's the shell called?" I asked, soft. He grinned. "It's all smoke. No one's looking. But for the record, check Apex Horizon Holdings." I wrote it on a napkin slowly, like a man who didn't want to forget the name that just saved his life. A vendor stopped by, some guy from Material Supply. Congratulated him on nailing Morrison Road, whatever that meant. Andrew clinked his empty glass and said, "I nail all the materials." It wasn't clever. It was loud. The bartender frowned and moved down the counter. Then it came. He leaned back one more time and smiled wider than ever. I cloned your badge, farm boy. You were perfect. Clean hands, clean timeline. I knew you wouldn't fight dirty. That's what made it so easy. My stomach dropped, but I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just tucked the napkin under the leather check presenter as the server dropped it off. Right on cue. Sable walked past the booth. She didn't stop. Just snapped a quick photo of the napkin while Andrew was flipping it open and disappeared into the crowd without a word. He didn't notice. Outside, I exhaled for the first time in an hour. The air was wet, drizzling. I didn't care. 2 blocks down, Sable texted Ivy the photo with timestamp confirmation. Legal had it. Chain of custody clean. I kept walking. Andrew came back from the bar looking smug. "So," he said. "We good?" I nodded. "Deal works. I'll keep my mouth shut." He raised his glass. "To men who know their station." I didn't clink his glass, just nodded again and stood up like it hurt to do it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Nora. 1 line. "We have it." I walked 3 blocks through the rain before my knees stopped shaking. By the time I reached the far lot, Audrey's SUV was already idling at the curb. I slid into the passenger seat. Ivy sat in the back, laptop open, headphones on. The audio was uploading. I reached into my coat, pulled the recorder off my collar, and handed it to her. She nodded once and set it next to her bag without a word. Audrey kept her hands on the wheel and her eyes forward. She didn't say anything for a full minute. Then, without looking at me, she said, "He left my mother on a curb and sold my company out from under me." I looked at her. She was stone still, jaw tight. "You're not the kind of person people get away with that around," I said. She didn't smile, but something in her jaw softened. Thursday, 8:30 a.m., I stepped into the Stewart boardroom and felt the weight of the place settle on my shoulders. Mahogany table, high-backed chairs, polished silence. It didn't feel like a company anymore. It felt like a courtroom. Gordon sat at the head, sleeves rolled, glasses low on his nose. Ivy had a tidy stack of documents in front of her, color-coded tabs sticking out like little flags. Sable leaned forward on her elbows, laptop open, eyes sharp. Andrew walked in late, naturally. Clyde Price followed, suit too shiny, smile too thin. Andrew looked rested, almost smug. Clyde opened first. "We consider the method of evidence collection deeply problematic, illicit, potentially defamatory." Gordon held up a hand. "We're not a court. We're a company." Ivy didn't flinch. "Per internal ethics policy, the audio was recorded in a venue with posted surveillance notice, with the consent of the establishment, and logged in legal. The vote will be based on physical and digital exhibits." No one blinked. No one shuffled. Just silence while Ivy pressed play. Andrew's voice spilled out, mocking me as shop-class charity, bragging about badge cloning, the leak, the fake permit smoothing. The moment he called me the perfect fall guy, the room felt like it stopped breathing. You could hear a paperclip drop on the carpet. Then Sable put the deck on screen. Slide after slide, security stills of Andrew in the copy room after hours. No meeting logged. Footage matched to access badge times. Cloned RFID data. The napkin photo with Apex Horizon Holdings. Timeline of his unexplained permit trip that lined up with the Shell lender email trail. Audrey cleared her throat. "For the record, I'm disclosing conflict and abstaining from any disciplinary vote related to Andrew Nelson." Gordon nodded once. "So noted," Audrey added. "And for the minutes, any pilot program budget expansion will come from the CEO's operating authority, and I'll bring it to the board if it crosses capital expenditure thresholds." Clean, precise, like a scalpel cutting out the rot. Gordon looked directly at Andrew. "Mr. Nelson, is that your voice on the recording?" Andrew didn't blink. "Sounds like a deepfake. Audio tools can replicate tone now." Sable didn't wait. She played the second clip, Andrew's proud little line about nailing all the materials. A joke only he found funny. Done. Ivy pulled out the last nail. 2 emails from the Shell lender, referencing collateralized Stewart contracts. No board vote. No transparency. Just his signature. The board murmured. Quiet. Low. Not in his favor. Andrew turned toward me. This whole thing's personal. He's been gunning for me since day one. I didn't say a word. He's trying to take my seat. Andrew started again. I still said nothing. My hands were flat on the table. My eyes locked on Gordon's. Loud men hang themselves if you give them rope. Clyde raised his voice. We motion to exclude all recordings as improperly gathered and prejudicial. My client reserves. Gordon didn't look up. Motion denied. Then he raised his hand slightly. I propose a vote to remove Andrew Nelson for cause, notify the state licensing board, and begin immediate unwinding of all deals connected to Apex Horizon Holdings. He looked around the table. Those in favor? Hands went up. Everyone but Audrey's. Opposed? No hands. Gordon nodded. Motion carries. Effective immediately. Security. Collect all company devices from Mr. Nelson. Legal will coordinate offboarding. Clyde stood halfway and stammered. We object. This is not a proper... Gordon raised an eyebrow. We're not a court, Mr. Price. We're done here. Andrew didn't move. Not for a second. Then he stood slowly, like he thought the floor might cave under him. Sable closed her laptop. He framed David publicly. He gets cleared the same way. Ivy nodded. David Walker is reinstated without condition. Nora leaned in. I'd like to propose an expansion of his role. Director of Artisan Partnerships and Guild Programs. Pilot success proves long-term need. I'll handle his performance reviews and budget roll-ups through operations. Audrey, steady as ever, said, Approved. She looked at me, then added, and include a budget line for a permanent community guild house, class space, workshop, one full bay for David's own shop. No one argued. Gordon turned to me. Mr. Walker, any comment? I stood slowly. My throat felt like sand. I'll keep building, I said. The rest will speak for itself. Gordon gave a short nod. Some men speak with their hands. That'll do. The firehouse still smelled like smoke and old paint when we moved in. Station 27, retired 10 years ago, had leaky ceilings, rusted bay doors, and enough dust in the rafters to choke a crew. But it had bones. Stewart funded the foundation work. Apprentices handled the demo. I handled the rest. We put in a freight elevator where the pole used to be. Ran conduit. Built benches from reclaimed pine. My shop got the back corner, Bay 2. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine again. First thing I built in that space was a bench for Jonah. Cherry top, walnut legs, no screws, just joinery and trust. Took me 4 days. Ivy fast-tracked his permit issues the second we flagged that mystery complaint. Jonah didn't ask who sent it. He just handed me a worn glove and said, You're playing left field next Thursday. No excuses. Caitlin rolled in once a week with a clipboard and zero patience. She called out gaps in the caulking, sloppy paint lines. Poor broom placement. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. When I asked if she ever took a day off, she said, When the coffee's bad and the work's worse, so not today. She became our sharpest critic, and, maybe without saying it, our heart. Sable showed up a few weeks later with a camera crew and a folded printout of questions. We were graduating our first cohort, 12 kids, 10 finished, 2 lined up for union apprenticeships. The shoot was short, sharp, clean. She pulled me into one photo. I said no. She said too bad. I stayed in the back. The next day, Nora told me Audrey had filed the papers. Divorce, formally. I didn't ask for details. Later, Audrey caught me by the boiler room and said, I'm done picking safe mistakes. That includes him. That includes most of the last 5 years. I nodded. Good. You deserve better. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Most days, we kept the line straight between us. Professional, productive, focused on the work. But one night after a city panel on historic zoning, we got stuck in traffic for 40 minutes, and something cracked. She said, I need to know you're not going to vanish in 2 years. I said, I'm not going anywhere. She shook her head. That's easy to say. I need proof you're not just here because it's convenient. That night I pulled my contract, extended it. 5-year teaching commitment, signed and filed. Turned down an offer from a private institute out west. Moved a cot and a shelf into the room above the tool closet. It was small, cold in the mornings. Perfect. Alice brought her homework into the shop once a week, sat near the lathe, and quizzed me on spelling words while holding a mallet in one hand. She learned to grip it right, light hands, strong arms. She said my sandwiches were better than the school's because I remembered her extra pickles. I told her that was the highest praise I'd gotten all year. Andrew's mess didn't fade. It just unraveled louder. The permit office opened a formal review. Ivy sent letters to the shell lender that made them stop answering emails altogether. One by one, the quiet corners he used to operate in started blinking red. Audrey stayed above it all. No speeches, no spite, just precision. She called the audit committee herself, handed over every document without being asked. If it hurt, she didn't show it. I started sleeping through the night again. Not every night, but enough that I noticed, and that was something. The firehouse settled into rhythm faster than I thought it would. The kind of rhythm that doesn't make a sound until you realize you're no longer holding your breath. By early October, the guild house smelled like pine shavings, fresh coffee, and chalk dust that never really leaves old brick. We put out folding chairs, made a pot of strong roast, and let the doors stay open. Not for press, just for people. Parents came first, then apprentices, then neighbors who wandered in because the music was decent and someone said there'd be cupcakes. No speeches, no sales pitch. Just tools on benches, work hung on pegboards, and smiles that didn't feel forced. Audrey showed up around noon with Caitlin and Alice in tow. Alice had the poodle carving in her hands, the one I gave her months back. Its ears were worn soft from being carried, one eye a little smudged. She held it like it was worth more than anything in the room. I caught her eye and nodded. "I've got a surprise for you after the tour." Her eyes lit up. "Is it another carving?" "You'll have to wait and see." She guessed 6 things, none of them right, while we walked the halls. Caitlin rolled beside us like a foreman doing a walkthrough. When someone asked if she was part of the build team, she said, "I own clipboards." That counts. We cut the ribbon in the main bay. Gordon made a short speech and waved off the mic. Said something about good hands, long work, and how this kind of place might outlast our names. I believed him. After the cupcakes were down to crumbs and napkins, I asked Audrey and Alice to follow me out back. The old engine yard had been fenced off, turned into a tidy little run. No more sirens, just soft dirt, a few benches, and a leash line. Jonah waited by the fence. A little black and white poodle sat beside him, ears too big for his head, tail twitching like it had its own engine. The second he saw Alice, he stood and wagged like she'd told the world's best joke. I looked at Audrey. She nodded once. Quiet, solid. I crouched next to Alice. "He came from the city shelter. He's yours if you want him." She dropped to her knees so fast she nearly tipped over. Wrapped her arms around the dog like she'd been waiting her whole life for him. "You mean really mine?" she asked. "All yours. Walks, feedings, baths." She said, "You've been keeping the checklist." "I have. It's on the fridge with magnets, and he looks exactly like the carving." Jonah grinned. "He's got no name yet. That's on you." Alice tilted her head, looked him up and down with full focus. Then she straightened. "Sir Noodles." We didn't argue. It stuck. Caitlin rolled over and hugged me tight around the waist. Her grip had more strength than I expected. She pulled me down a bit and whispered, "You did right by all of us." I nodded once, jaw tight, didn't trust my voice. Audrey and I stood off to the side while Sir Noodles ran laps like a tiny cannonball, Alice chasing after him, both of them laughing like they invented the sound. "I'm not rushing anything," I said. "I'm just here, doing the work, one board at a time." She looked straight ahead. "I know." Then she reached for my hand, held it like something earned. Across the yard, the new sign caught the afternoon light. Stuart Guild House, with a clean line underneath. Artisan partnerships led by David Walker. I felt it then. Not pressure, not panic, just a kind of weight that meant something. The good kind. I thought about that oak tree, that first night, the rain, the silence, the work I lost and the better work I found, the people who showed up when it counted. I'm not a speech guy. Most days I just make the cut and let the joinery speak. But if you asked me what changed, I tell you simple. I stopped working alone. I stopped being alone. Hey, real quick. First off, Merry Christmas. And thank you so much for your support. Before you head out, have you ever had to rebuild your life from scratch and still find the guts to open your heart again? If this story hit something in you, please tap that hype button to help it reach more people who might need to hear it. It means a lot. And if you haven't yet, please hit like and subscribe. It's just one click, but it really helps us keep making more stories like this. Drop a comment too, even a good story or your own thoughts. I read every single one. Love you guys.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.